Child of the Wolves, Chapter 7. Danger at Dusk. Granite woke to sunlight. Through the spruce branches overhead, he saw blue sky and white clouds. The sun had slipped behind the mountains 4 times since he left the kennels. During those days, he had eaten only insects, leaves, grass, and a few green berries, and the growing tips of bushes. Hunger was always with him. To fill his stomach, he gulped water from the stream, but the cold water sometimes did not stay down. Often he thought sadly of kibble and meat, a great bowlful. Granite knew he had to eat. He trotted through the trees, watching for signs of an unwary squirrel or a careless bird. He would have been happy with the smallest mouse, but no matter how hard he tried, he captured nothing. The little dog's wanderings took him out of the forest and up into the hills and along a river that wound between the mountains, its coils shining in the sun. His journey brought him to a valley, but he found no more food here than in the old land. As Granite left the trees and moved into a meadow, a cloud of tiny flies whirled around him. His fur was so thick that they could not reach his skin, but they swarmed into his ears and eyes. He flicked his ears and shook his head, trying to chase them away. He fought the insects for several minutes, but nothing seemed to discourage them. A sudden crack made him look up. What he saw swept all thoughts of insects out of his head. In front of him, so close he could see their fur blowing in the breeze, stood a grizzly and her 3 cubs. Their backs were toward him. The bears were at the edge of the clearing, the mother feeding on a bed of lacy green plants, while her cubs tore at nearby clumps of tall grass. As Granite watched, the mother moved to a patch of tall, flowering plants. When she settled down to eat, she was facing him. Hoping she would not see him, Granite stopped. He stood so still that he did not even blink when insects flew into his eyes. The mother bear's body was pale brown, and her legs were dark. She was the biggest animal Granite had ever seen. She was bigger than Tim and Kate and even the stranger put together. She had long claws and sharp teeth that could tear a puppy apart. Every few minutes, the bear held her head high and tossed her muzzle about, checking for strange scents. She had not noticed Granite for the same reason that he had not noticed her. A cross wind carried their scents away. One of the cubs, tired of grubbing for grass, One of the tubs, tired of grubbing for grass. It cuffed another cub. The 2 little bears rolled on the ground, just as Digger and Granite often did. The 3rd cub danced around them, waiting to wrestle the winner. The mother raised her head. She growled softly. The cubs ignored her. They tumbled over the ground, moving closer to Granite with each roll. The mother bear got to her feet. She started toward the cubs, but she was not in a hurry. Before she reached them, one of the pesky flies darted into Granite's nose. A terrible tickling sensation filled his head. He fought the feeling, but it was no use. He could not hold back the sneeze. It exploded with a roar that rolled across the clearing. The mother bear stopped. She reared up on her hind legs and moved her head from side to side. Her rounded ears stood erect, and her small black eyes blinked as she searched for the source of the sound. She found Granite and squinted, trying to decide what he was. Granite waited, not daring to breathe. The bear made a strange noise that sounded like huff, huff. She made it again. The sounds were not loud. When the cubs heard the danger signal, they stopped playing and ran to her side. Still, Granite did not move. If he fled, the bear would surely charge. So he hunched down and tried to look like a rock. He hoped she would decide that a puppy was too small to bother about. For a long time, the bear and the little dog stared at each other. Then the bear raised her front paws and thumped the ground. She thumped the ground again and again. Granite didn't know whether she was warning him to leave or announcing a charge. He soon found out. The bear gave a terrifying roar. Then she flattened her ears, lowered her head, and broke into a rocking run. Granite's legs trembled, but he did not move. The bear's powerful legs covered the ground with great bounds. As she ran toward the little dog, her head and massive shoulders looked as broad as Tim's truck. She came closer, and he felt the heat of her breath. At the last minute, when he had given up all hope, the bear veered to one side and crashed past him. Granite whirled around. Behind him, he saw a caribou calf running for cover. Perhaps the bear saw the lone calf while she was charging. Perhaps it had been her target from the first. Granite had no way of knowing and didn't much care. Without waiting to see if the calf escaped, he ran into the trees as fast as his short legs would carry him. He reached the stream and splashed into it. He drank thirstily, then trotted for a time in the shallow water. After Granite left the stream, he looked for a place to rest. Not far from the water's edge, he found a log that had fallen against a large spruce. He squirmed under the log and curled up against the spruce trunk. The space smelled of the squirrel that had used it before him. It also smelled of something else. Granite caught the scent of food. He dug beneath the fallen log and unearthed a cache of seeds, which he ate greedily. When he had swallowed the last seed, Granite thought about home. The picture of his mother's face filled his head, and he whimpered. He felt alone and sad. He was still sad when he fell asleep. Granite slept for a long time. He slept the rest of the day and all that twilight. When he awoke, rays of sun streamed through the trees, making pools of light on the forest floor. He stretched and shook himself, then started a search for food. Except for a few beetles and a cricket or two, he found nothing to eat that day. He was too discouraged to play and too clumsy to catch any mice or squirrels. Before the shadows gathered, Granite reached the edge of the forest. Not far away, a rocky hillside rose toward the sky. Between the boulders were splashes of orange and yellow and pink and white flowers. He sat beneath a tree and studied the slope, hoping to spot a cave that would shelter him from bears. It grew dim. The color faded from the hillside. the sky clouded over. Granite sniffed deeply, but found no danger in the air. Boldly he trotted out of the trees. A strong wind blew from his back, bending the fireweed and ruffling his coat. He had forgotten that it was impossible to smell animals downwind of him. He had also forgotten that the wind at his back carried his scent toward any animal in his path. As he climbed the hill, picking his way among the rocks, a large body hurtled toward him. It passed so close that the odor of cat stung his nose. Startled, Granite slipped and tumbled down the rocks, rolling over and over to the foot of the hill. He landed in a heap, his front paw bent under him. He tried to stand, but his leg crumpled. Back up the hill loomed a gray lynx, its yellow eyes glowing like twin fires. It gathered itself to leap. Just before it sprang, a long, low howl rang through the shadows. The lynx wheeled and fled in the opposite direction, bounding silently through the bushes. Granite looked up to see a great black form standing on a high rock. It was a wolf.